Hi, it's Dan again and welcome to Unified Gaming. Today we're going to look at my Magicka Necromancer PvP build called Soulbones. So let's jump right in. So we're going to begin by looking at the character sheet. Now unbuffed, these are our stats. 43,000 Magicka, 19.5k health and almost 16,000 stamina. Our health will increase by 5,000, so in PvP you would have 24.5k health, that's with CP. Without CP it sits around 21,000. Our stamina is on 16,000 in CP. Without CP it goes down to about 13,000. And our Magicka reduces by about 3,000, sitting around 40,000. These are unbuffed and these do increase. Our spell damage is on 1,700. That does increase to almost 2,000 without a continuous. Our spell crit is on 39%. That does increase as well due to our passives. Our Magicka recovery is on 1,632. That will increase by 200, and then with continuous will increase further, pushing it over 2,000, so really good sustain without a potion. With a potion you can hit about 2,400 recovery. Our stam recovery is on 580. That can be increased with our potions if we need, but I find that to be manageable. As for those resistances, we have 17,000 spell resist and 13,000 physical resist. For the critical resistance we have 1,473. This build is missing one piece of impen, so that would go up to about 1,600 critical resist. Now this is with 0 points in the CP passive. If you put 44 points in there, which you should for PvP CP, you will then be hitting 2,800 crit resist quite comfortably, and that will make you nice and tanky. Now as for my Mundus, I'm using Atronach to help support the regen on this build. You could switch this for the mage, and that will give you more damage and it will make your damage shields a little bit bigger, or you could use the Apprentice for even more damage, but it won't age your shields. And if you want more damage you can then even try the Lover, which is just really offensive damage, but that will not help your healing or your shields whatsoever. I am a vampire in this build. I run tri-stat food both in Battlegrounds, no CP, and also in CP. If you find sustain hard you could swap this for Witch Mother's Potent Brew, and I will show you that shortly. As for my race, I am a Breton. I think Breton is probably best in slot for this kind of playstyle. Our high elf will work just as well, and all you'll need to do is just switch out some of the glyphs on the jewellery, run in triple regen, and you will be forced to use the Atronach Mundus to help sustain. Without those changes you will not be able to run this build as easily as you can as a Breton. That said, you will have slightly more damage though. Now I want to quickly buff up and have a look at those stats. Now buffed up on our character sheet at 47,000 Magicka, our resistance goes up to 22,000 spell and 18,000 physical. Now our resistances do climb even further. When we use our heal, it does increase our resistance. In no CP PvP, I've had the heal hit for upwards of 7,000, and that will give us 3,500 resistance. So let's buff up once more. There's our armour. So if we add on another 3.5k, that pushes our spell resist to 25,000 and our physical resist to 21,000 on the front bar. On the back bar, where we're nice and tanky, it pushes us up to 25k and 21k physical. If we add on the 3.5k from the heal, that will make our spell resist at almost 29,000 and our physical resist at almost 25,000. So nice and tanky. You will notice that I also have some more impen on the back bar, as the shield is impenetrable. The Magicka does get increased due to one of the sets we run, which we'll go through in a moment, and you can see the recovery is also increased due to the Necromancer passives. We're now going to go through the skills. So on this build I run a number of skills. I've chosen skills from different skill lines and have experimented to kind of find a setup that I like and that I find that works well for me. Currently I'm running Ricochet Skull. It's a good spammable, single target damage, and it will bounce and hit multiple people on every third cast, doing a little bit more damage. I use Stalking Blastbones as my burst ability. This is good, you can fire it, let it chase the target that you want, and it will hit that target only, which is wonderful. Fire and forget, and job done. I'm using Flame Reach as my stun. Having the extra range on the morph makes it more viable in PvP, especially open world. I'm using Inner Light on the front bar. This gives me a bit more max Magicka, as well as the spell crit buff, which is very helpful. By having this on the bar, you just get extra damage without having to actually do anything. This is definitely worth having on your front bar. I'm using the skeletal arcanist. Now I use this because of the duration, it lasts 16 seconds. This allows us to keep one of our passives, and that's in Living Dead, called Undeath Confederate. And you get 200 magic and stamina recovery when you have Blast Bones, the Mage or the Mender active. As this has 8 seconds, Blast Bones has 8 seconds, and the Arcanist has 16 seconds, it's easier to keep Arcanist up. And it is also cheap, and you can use it when there are no targets nearby to help with your stam management. It also does some damage over time, and it's a bit hard to dodge because it's an AoE. As for the ultimate, I'm running Soul Assault. Now I'm using Soul Assault because one of our passives in the Gravelord, so let's go to the Gravelord, it's called Rapid Rot, and that increases our damage over time effects by 10%, and Soul Assault is treated as damage over time. Now some other ultimates you might want to use in your front bar are as followed. I have experimented with Glacial Colossus. This is really good in open world, especially organised groups, but in battlegrounds it's a bit expensive to use and can be hit or miss. I've tried with the Goliath. This is very good on the back bar if you need a burster, if you do not have any of the other ultimates, which I'll suggest in a moment. As for the damage is very mediocre, but it's a good sort of oh no button if things don't go your way. As for the ultimate that resurrects people, incredibly useful in open world, but unfortunately it's very expensive, so I'd suggest against this if you are doing battlegrounds. Now for the back bar, I'm running Beckoning Armour. This is my armour buff. This will just gives you the armour passives that you need, but I like this morph over the sustain morph, which reduces the cost of your summons, as this morph will pull enemies to you, and this will help you avoid being sniped or ganked at range. I run Resistant Flesh as my burst heal. This is a very strong heal, very similar to Breath of Life. It does give you Minor Defile, but as you've probably noticed, I run Pirate Skeleton, and I have a high Minor Defile upturn, so this doesn't make much of a difference. The benefit of this though is that it gives you obviously access to a really strong burst heal, which also gives you armour, making you tankier once you've used it. I run Harness Magicka, standard magic shield. I have toyed around with Dampen Magic, but I find the sustain that this offers to be way better, and as a result you can keep this up a lot more frequently, thus reducing your overall damage. I run the Intensive Mender Morph of the Spirit. I found that this to be better than the 10% damage mitigation, as the heal is much stronger and the mitigation is about 5 to 6% after the damage calculation has been taken into full effect. I've also put on a mobility skill. I use Race Against Time currently. This is a nice 4-second major expedition, helping you move around. Gives you minor force, increasing your crit damage done, and as we have almost 40% crit base, this is very helpful. And on top of that, it also removes all snares and immobilizations from you, and also grants you immunity to them. So this just means you can get around the battlefield much easier, and a DK Talons hitting you with Talons, or a Warden hitting you with the Blockade of Ice, this will help you get out of their way a lot easier. For that ultimate, I'm running Temporal Guard. Now I don't actually use this, but it is on the bar because of the minor protection, reducing all incoming damage by 8%. Now if you're somebody without Temporal Guard, you have a few options. You could try the Ravenous Goliath. This is a good burst heal, giving you 30k health instantly, so helping you get out of trouble if you need it. And it is 30k health, not 15, so it's basically a 30,000 heal. You could use the Resurrection Ultimate, that is really strong. As I'm using the Sword and Shield, you could consider using Shield Wall. I don't actually have that unlocked yet, and I have considered it, but I find Temporal Guard to be better personally. You could switch this to a Restoration Staff, but the staff does need to be defending trait, and then you could run the Restoration Ultimate. Again, that's a very good ultimate. For this patch, I would suggest going with the Restoration Ultimate that gives you all of the abilities casted, rather than the Major Force. You could use Bat Swarm and morph it to the swarm that actually heals you, and that is very useful. So you can have an offensive ult that heals you. That's an AoE, there's an option there. Or if you want to do a passive buff, which I like, where you don't actually have to use it, you could go down to the support and try a barrier, have it on your bar, no need to cast it, you can if you need it, but it's mainly for that Magicka aid passive, which is very helpful. Now I'm just going to go through a few passives and just briefly explain why I have what I have so far. and how I've achieved the damage and the burst that this build needs. So looking at those passives, I've got all of my class passives. Every single one is useful. Now I'm just going to go through and just mention a few key ones that I think are really important. A sustain passive does help, but it's not essential. This is very helpful. Death Knell is partly why we have so much damage when they are in execute phase. The Necromancer lacks an execute, so by slotting at least 2 abilities, if not 3, we can push an extra 20 if not 30% crit chance when they are below 25% health, and this will allow for the lack of an execute. Again, Dismember is a very useful passive as well. This increases the spell and physical penetration, allowing you a bit of wiggle room with your CP, giving you a bit more damage or a bit more healing if you like. And then Rapid Rot obviously increases your damage over time effects, and obviously that increases the damage of Soul Assault. As for the Bone Tyrants, all the passives are useful. This is a sustain passive, doesn't help you too much in PvP sadly. Now this passive is good against bleeds. There's very few ways to counter bleeds, but this is one of those ways, so this makes you a little bit tanky, so definitely worth getting this. This passive obviously increases our healing received from ourselves or other people, nice to have. We take a slight advantage on the back bar as we have 1 armor skill, but it's not too noticeable. And then obviously our last passive just gives us some extra health. Now for Living Death, we have all of the passives here. Now this passive is very nice, as when you get a negative effect on you, which is quite often in PvP, especially if fighting magic users using Inferno Staffs, you get 8% increased healing done. That obviously means that when you heal yourself, your healing is also stronger. So when you pair this with this passive, on our back bar we have almost an extra 10% healing done, stroke received, and that means obviously we can kind of negate the minor defile that the Bursto gives us or Pirate Skeleton gives us. So we have near death experience, very similar to the offensive version. As we get lower, we have a higher crit chance for our healing abilities. So at 50% health it's an extra 10% crit chance. At 25% health it's an extra 15% crit chance. So this does add up quite quickly, potentially allowing us to hit about 60% crit chance for a heal. And that's why I'm able to give really large heals to teammates at the brink of death. This is a passive that we don't take advantage of sadly. We don't use the corpse gameplay in this build. Now as for the sustain passive, I need to run Blast Bones, Skeletal Mage or Spirit Mender to proc the passive. As Spirit Mender has 8 seconds, and so does Stalk and Blast Bones, I found they're hard to keep that passive going, so I use the Arcanist to help maintain the extra sustain. Now you could change this if you like. For the other passives, I have all of my passives in Destruction Staff. Everything helps. If you wanted to use a Frost Staff though, just take out of this if you wanted to block with your stamina instead of Magicka. I use a Fire Staff, so obviously heavy attacks are increased by this. And the rest of these passives are useful. Now I'm using Sword and Shield on the back bar. I use this just because of the passives only. Fortress reduces cost of blocking. This lets you block more damage. This one lets you block more damage from ranged attacks. And this one lets you block and move a little bit faster whilst blocking. All of these are obviously incredibly useful. Also by having the shield we get a bit more resistance because of the shield itself, and we have access to another trait and another glyph. So we have another impenetrable trait on the back bar, and we also have another Magicka glyph to increase the size of our shields once more. If you are preferring to drop the resistant flesh because you don't want minor defile, or you want to drop Pirate Skeleton, you could take this off and you could swap this for Ward Ally from Steadfast Ward Morph, and then run a Restoration Staff, but that does have to be defending on the back bar. As for the light armor passives from all of those, I'm using Hardest Magicka as I've already said. I'm running 5 light and 2 heavy, so you do want 2 of your heavy passives. So I have all of the armor passives here, the sustain passives, and the max health. The bottom 2 only work if you have 5 pieces or more, so do not get them. For Soul Magic, I only have Soul Assault and no passives there. For my Vampirism, I have the Supernatural Recovery for some more sustain, Undeath, which helps make this build really tanky at low health, and Unnatural Resistance. You don't really need this one if you don't want it though. Undeath pairs very well with Temporal Guard, because you get 8% mitigation there, and then you get up to 33% based on your missing health. And then you obviously have your armor, plus some more resistance, plus a shield. All of these will apply to the shield, making the shield incredibly strong, allowing you to out shield and take incoming damage quite easily. As for the guilds, my fighter's guild's not maxed, but if you maxed it, I would suggest getting Banished to the Wicked, a bit more alt gen. The rest of the passives aren't useful and the skills aren't particularly helpful in this build. For Mage Guild, Inner Light's obviously on the front bar, very useful to have for the max Magicka passively. Some people have messed around with entropy and I've tried it, but I find I can get the spell power buff from a potion if I want, from a Dragon Knight, or I just go without it, and generally I go without it as it doesn't add too much damage in all honesty. As for passives from the Mage Guild, the main one that you want to aim for is Magicka Controller. It gives you 2% max Magicka for your front bar when it's fully leveled up, giving you about an extra 600 Magicka max, so it's not too essential. For the Sigil Order, I use Temporal Guard, as I've already said, and Race Against Time. Passive wise, I go for Clairvoyance, reduces the cost of your Race Against Time, as well as the ultimate. Spell Orb sometimes hits people, bit of damage, but the barrier is quite nice, so when you hold block, you activate the shield, and you can then put another shield on top of that, and then you have 2 shields. As you can see, they are going over my health bar, so they're quite helpful. I do not have my Undaunted, but if I had my Undaunted, obviously Undaunted Metal, I would then switch my monster set out slightly, and I would have one medium monster set and one heavy piece monster set, obviously both impenetrable. I will keep the same monster set though, Pirate Skeleton. This will push the max resource up to almost 50,000 Magicka in CP, and in no CP about 42 to 43,000 Magicka. The health will go up a little bit, and the stamina will also go up. Although the health does go up a bit, it does also go down because we would lose 2% max health from the heavy armor passive if we did this. But it's definitely worth doing it if you have Undaunted. As for the Alliance War, I would suggest getting all of these passives. I just haven't yet because I was a bit low on skill points. All of these are useful. Combat Frenzy, particularly in Battlegrounds, the other two do not help in Battlegrounds. For support, these are useful, every single passive. Magicka Aid is useful if you slot a skill. If you do not plan on using any of these skills, drop Magicka Aid, you do not need it. Obviously I'm a Breton, as I've said, all racial skills. Now I've got my Alchemy up to level 50, just for the medicinal use passive, incredibly useful, definitely worth getting. Basically what that makes happen is that your potion is on a 45-second cooldown. Most buffs last about 38 seconds without this passive. With this passive they now last 48 seconds roughly. This means you can keep 100% uptime on most of the sustained buffs from like tri-stat potions, so it's definitely worth getting. Little tip, if you want to level this up really fast, get loads of spider eggs, and you can use blue enteroloma, or you can use Nirnbrute to quickly level it and make poisons and sell them back. It costs you about 10,000 gold total to get your alchemy to level 50 this way. Now we're quickly just going to go through a few variations on the skills that you might want to try out, so you can change this how you see fit. I like using Flame Reach as my stun, so I normally go Blast Bones, Heavy Attack, cast Flame Reach whilst I'm doing the heavy attack. I then cast Ricochet Skull and hit block. This will then animation cancel the skull. The skull will fire straight away, and then I'll hit the Soul Assault straight after. This will usually one-shot somebody. Obviously during this I'll keep my Arcanist up, just doing passive damage as well as proccing one of our sets and our passives. You could switch out this though and put on False Pulse, and then you would go with Blast Bones, Heavy Attack into Clench, Ricochet Skull, hit block, False Pulse, hit block, Soul Assault. False Pulse again if needed for more damage. This makes it much snappier. If you did this though, I would suggest moving the Arcanist to the back bar. And the downside of doing this though is that you will lose your mobility or a heal. So you do need to obviously make that decision yourself. For the back bar, if you were somebody who didn't have the Sigil Order, so you don't have Somerset or ESO+, what you could do is you could run Mist Form from the Vampire skill line instead of Race Against Time. This will give you access to a movement skill. Alternatively, you could drop that and then choose to run another skill of your choosing. And some people like to run, obviously, Defensive Posture. This increases the amount of damage you can block when it's leveled up by quite a lot. So that makes blocking a bit easier. You could choose to put on another passive skill or another heal. You might choose to run Bitter Harvest, at which point, because it's free to cast, give you a little bit of healing, but more ult gen, allowing you to do more damage with your Soul Assault. So looking at that armour, I'm running the Necromancer set. I'm running Pirate Skeleton, and I'm running Elsweyr. I've been running this for about 3-4 weeks now. This has not changed, but the skills have changed quite a lot through testing. I run Inferno Staff Necropotence, Inferno for the single target damage. I've made this Nernhound. Now Sharpened works just as well. You could go Infused, but if you go Infused I will change the glyph from increased spell damage to Shock, just for a bit more damage as it will proc more frequently. The reason I went with Nernhound, however, is because of this. When I pop the Spirit Mender on the back bar, and then I switch to the front bar, the Spirit Mender will look at my spell damage on the front bar, and its heals will be calculated on my current bar's spell damage, not the bar it was casted on. As such, my spell damage is on 1200 here. On the front bar without any glyphs, it's on 1700, making that Spirit Mender significantly stronger than it would have been otherwise. So it's just a useful thing to know. For the back bar, obviously I have a Sword and Shield. Any one-handed weapon will work here, but make it defending for a bit more resource. Impenetrable, Magicka on the shield. As for the enchantment on the back bar, that's up to you. You could run a poison. I don't really use the poisons armor-wise. I go Tri-Stat on all the big pieces, so head, chest, and legs. And I go Max Magicka on the small pieces, shoulders, waist, hands, and feet. You will notice that some of my armor is green, purple, blue, and one piece is the incorrect trait. This should be impenetrable. I would keep my armor at purple. No need to upgrade to gold. There's very little to gain from it. But if you are wanting to upgrade to gold, upgrade your front hand as quick as you can, as this is the biggest difference for damage. As for my jewellery, I'm running Elsweyr. I'm running all arcane. I have used infused. I've tested it on the PTS heavily, and although you can push really high spell damage, you get the same results, very similar, but you don't have the damage shield. So I found just going the max Magicka route for damage to be way more effective. I've gone with 2 recovery glyphs and then 1 spell damage. Now this is for battlegrounds, so no CP. If I took this into CP, I'd change this glyph to either spell damage, or I would simply just change my Munderstone, which is what I normally do, and just go the mage, at which point your recovery goes down to about 1400, and I would then run on the jewellery an extra recovery here to push it to about 1500 again. So that way you're sustainable. So that's all the gear, all the skills, kind of what I use, why I use them. Hopefully that helps. For consumables, obviously I said Tri-Stat food. You could use Witch Mothers if you want for a bit more sustain. Potion wise, I'm currently using trash potions, so just things you find in the overworld. Not particularly great, but they kind of help. I would suggest though getting Tri-Stat potions or using Essence of Immovability, the ones that give you both health and Magicka back. And if you have your Alchemy max out, you get 10 seconds of CC immunity, meaning that you can use all of your stamina up by rolling about, which is really good, or blocking, and then pop the potion and you have 10 seconds, by which point you regenerate about 3/4 of your stamina, and then you're good to go once more. And there we go guys, that's my Soulbones build. I've been running this for the past 3-4 weeks. It hasn't changed other than the skills, testing things out. Obviously I've been working on getting the right traits for the armour. But yeah, you've seen what it's like on the YouTube channel so far. Now I know some of you will be interested in those champion points. Kind of what are they? How are they sort of distributed? Now I'm on 309 CP. On the Xbox I am at 1010 roughly. So I know the CP system really, really well. So what I've done is I've put all of the CP that I would use for Cyrodiil in the description of the video, so check it out. I've also put in a link to the build editor that will give you an idea of kind of the tooltips you would expect. On the Soulbones, the build editor has it at 16,000. It is slightly bugged, so it's about a 1,000 difference, but your Soulbones will be about 15,500 roughly. With continuous and everything fully buffed, about 16 to 16.5, so very high. Your Soul Assault with just the glyph and the CP will go up to 71,000, with continuous about 75, so a significant damage increase. So if you enjoyed the video, obviously hit that like button, and if you want to see regular content on ESO or on the other games we will feature, then hit that subscribe button, turn the bell notification on, and you will be informed as soon as we post something up. Now if you've got anything you would like to say to me, just leave it in the comments below. I hope you enjoy watching, Dan signing off.